Commander Axe stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive blue world grow larger on the display screens. 11,000 years. That was how long the Concordat had ruled this section of the galaxy. 11,000 years of perfect order, of knowing their place at the top of all civilizations. This world, Sol 3, would be no different from the others. The scans showed a fractured species, divided into hundreds of competing groups. They had barely left their own atmosphere. Their weapons were chemical-based, laughably primitive. The subjugation would take perhaps a day, maybe two if the primitives proved stubborn. "Sir, shall I broadcast the standard message?" his communications officer asked. Axe nodded. He had given this speech 47 times in his career, 47 worlds brought into the Concordat, 47 species that learned their place. Proceed. The message went out across all frequencies. Primitive species of Sol 3, you are hereby incorporated into the Concordat. Resistance will result in the sterilization of your world. Compliance will result in your survival as a labor class. You have one solar rotation to respond. Axe expected the usual reactions: panic, confusion, perhaps a few desperate diplomatic overtures. Instead, the response came in less than 6 hours. Not words, action. Every satellite in orbit around the blue world suddenly changed course. Every orbital platform, every piece of space debris larger than a fist, all of them converged on his fleet. Then they exploded. Nuclear explosions, primitive fission weapons that barely registered on his shields. Axe laughed. "They think that will stop us. Pathetic." He turned to his weapons officer. "Commence bombardment of their major population centers. Leave enough alive to serve as labor. They need to learn what happens when primitives raise their hand against their betters." But before his weapons officer could acknowledge the order, every communication channel suddenly filled with the same message. It came from every nation on the planet below, broadcast simultaneously in the language. "You wanted a response. You'll get one, but you won't live to see it." Axe felt the first tremor of unease. How did they know the language? His scout probes had been stealthy, undetectable, yet these primitives spoke his tongue perfectly. Then the planet's surface began to open. Massive doors, kilometers wide, slid apart in deserts and mountains and ocean floors. What emerged made Axe's blood freeze. Manufacturing complexes, shipyards, weapons platforms the size of cities. They had been hidden underground, shielded from his scans, and they were already active, already building. "Sir, I'm detecting energy signatures," his sensor operator said, his voice rising with panic. They're beyond our scale. How is this possible?" The first salvo hit his vanguard ships before he could respond. These weren't primitive chemical weapons. These were weapons designed by a species that had spent the last 30 years studying technology, ever since they detected the first scout probe. Humanity had known they were coming. Humanity had prepared. The weapons tore through shields that had protected ships for. They weren't antimatter lances or plasma cannons. They were something new, something his sensors couldn't classify. Later, after everything was over, the survivors would learn the humans called them kinetic relativistic projectiles. Lumps of metal accelerated to 90% of light speed. Simple, devastating, unstoppable. "Evasive maneuvers," Axe screamed. But there was nowhere to evade to. The projectiles adjusted course mid-flight, hunting his ships like predators chasing prey. The humans had learned everything about tactics from the scout probes. They knew how ships moved, how they thought, how they fought. And they had built weapons specifically to counter every advantage they possessed. 3 ships vanished in the first minute, simply ceased to exist, torn apart by impacts that released more energy than small stars. Axe watched in horror as his fleet, the pride of the Concordat, scattered in disarray. "Return fire, all ships return fire." They did. Antimatter lances stabbed out toward the planet. Some hit the massive weapons platforms. The humans had expected that. The platforms were expendable, built to absorb the first wave of retaliation while the real weapons powered up. Those real weapons emerged from the underground complexes. Missiles, thousands of them, but not ordinary missiles. These were smart, adaptive, capable of learning from every near miss and adjusting their tactics. They swarmed around point defense fire like insects, too many to track, too fast to stop. "Sir, the humans are launching something else," the sensor operator said. "Smaller craft, single-pilot vessels, hundreds of them." Axe pulled up the tactical display. The human fighters were tiny, fragile things that would never survive in ship-to-ship combat, except they weren't engaging in ship-to-ship combat. They were darting between vessels, placing devices on hull sections. "What are they doing?" The answer came 30 seconds later when the devices detonated. Not explosions, portals, miniature wormholes that opened directly inside ships, bypassing shields entirely, exposing the interiors to vacuum. Axe felt his world crumbling. This wasn't how subjugations went. Primitives didn't fight back like this. They couldn't. It violated everything the Concordat knew about technological progression and warfare. Emergency jump. All ships prepare for emergency jump. But the humans had prepared for that too. The space around Sol was suddenly filled with gravity wells, artificial distortions that made faster-than-light travel impossible. The fleet was trapped, caught in a kill box designed by minds that had spent centuries perfecting the art of destroying each other. On the second day, Axe tried to negotiate. He broadcast a message offering terms, suggesting a peaceful resolution. The human response was simple. "You gave us 1 day to surrender. We're giving you the same courtesy. Surrender now or be destroyed." Axe couldn't surrender. The shame would be unbearable. The Concordat would execute him for such cowardice. Better to die fighting than live in disgrace. But his crew didn't share his dedication. On the third day, 5 ships broke formation and surrendered to the humans. Axe ordered the other ships to destroy the traitors. His weapons officer refused. The crew was breaking, seeing the truth that Axe couldn't accept. They weren't fighting primitives. They were fighting something far more dangerous. On the fourth day, the humans demonstrated a new weapon. They called it a matter disassembler. It didn't explode ships. It simply took them apart, molecule by molecule, sorting the materials for recycling. The crew of those ships didn't even have time to scream. They just stopped existing. On the fifth day, half the fleet was gone. The humans hadn't lost a single major installation. Their fighters, yes. Their platforms, yes. But nothing that mattered. Nothing that couldn't be replaced within hours from their underground factories. On the sixth day, Axe realized the truth. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were learning. Every tactic was being analyzed, countered, and improved upon. Every weapon was being studied and reverse-engineered. The humans were treating this invasion not as an existential threat but as a learning opportunity. That thought terrified him more than anything else. What kind of species looked at annihilation and saw a chance to improve? On the seventh day, Axe's flagship was the last ship remaining. He sat alone on the bridge. His crew had evacuated in the night, surrendering to the humans in exchange for their lives. He couldn't blame them. He was too tired to care anymore. A communication request came through. He accepted it. A human face appeared on his screen, an old female with gray hair and hard eyes. "Commander Axe," she said in perfect. "I am Secretary General of the United Nations of Earth. Your fleet is destroyed. Your crew is in our custody and will be treated according to the conventions of warfare. You have 2 choices. You can surrender and join them, or you can die on that ship. Choose now." Axe looked at the woman. Behind her, he could see human soldiers armed and ready. They looked tired. They looked grim. But they also looked competent in a way that made his scales itch with primal fear. "How?" he asked. "How did primitives defeat the Concordat?" His expression didn't change. "We're not primitives, Commander. We're humans. And we've been killing each other with ever-improving efficiency for 10,000 years. You just gave us a common enemy." She leaned forward. "Now choose, surrender or die." Axe chose surrender. As human soldiers boarded his ship and led him away, he sent one final message to the Concordat High Council, a warning, a desperate plea. "Do not send more ships. Do not engage these creatures. They are not primitives. They are something worse. Glass their world from orbit while you still can, or they will come for us all." The message was received. The High Council read it, and they made the worst decision in Concordat history. They decided that no primitive species could threaten the mighty. They decided to send War Fleet Omega. They decided to show Earth what real power looked like. In the underground complexes beneath Earth's surface, human engineers studied the captured ships with hungry eyes. They had 6 months before the next fleet would arrive. 6 months to learn everything they could from technology. 6 months to prepare for war. The humans smiled as they worked. They had given them a gift, not conquest, not subjugation, something better, a reason to unify, a reason to stop fighting each other and focus on a common threat. The Concordat had ruled for 11,000 years because they were strong, but they had been strong for so long that they had forgotten what real innovation looked like. They had forgotten what desperation could create. Humanity was about to remind them. The Concordat High Council chamber was a monument to eternal power. Carved from a single massive crystal that had taken 300 years to grow, it sparkled with inner light that represented the glory of civilization. 7 council members sat in their ancient seats, their scales gleaming with carefully maintained pigments that denoted their rank and achievements. High Counselor read Axe's message for the 3rd time. Around him, the other counselors whispered among themselves, their voices carrying notes of disbelief and outrage. "Impossible," Counselor said finally. "Subjugation Fleet Theta 9 destroyed by primitives. Axe must have gone mad. Space sickness, perhaps. The isolation broke his mind." "We have confirmed the fleet's destruction," said quietly, "and we have Axe in custody. The humans delivered him to our border world with a message. They said, and I quote, 'We return your commander as a gesture of good faith. Do not send more ships. We want peace, but we will accept war if you force it upon us.'" The council chamber fell silent, then laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Good faith? They destroy a subjugation fleet and speak of good faith. They mock us." "Perhaps we should consider their offer," Counselor N said. She was the youngest on the council, only 200 years in her position. "If they truly destroyed an entire fleet, they are more advanced than our intelligence suggested. Perhaps incorporation through diplomacy would be more efficient." "Diplomacy with primitives," slammed his hand on the crystal table. "We are the Concordat. We have ruled this galactic arm for 11,000 years. We do not negotiate with species that still use chemical propulsion. We do not show weakness to creatures that should be grateful we allow them to exist." Considered the options carefully. Axe's message had been clear. The humans were dangerous, but how dangerous could they truly be? One fleet lost did not mean the Concordat was threatened. Perhaps Axe had simply encountered an unexpected defense. Perhaps the humans had exhausted their resources in that one battle. Or perhaps, and this thought made Scales itch, perhaps the humans were something unprecedented. Something that didn't fit into the Concordat's understanding of how civilizations developed. "We will send War Fleet Omega," announced. 400 ships, the finest vessels in the Concordat, with quantum shields and antimatter weapons. If these humans truly are advanced enough to threaten us, Omega will crush them. If they merely had lucky victory against Theta 9, Omega will remind them of their place. "And if Axe was right," N asked quietly, "if these humans are truly dangerous?" Fixed her with a cold stare. "Then we will glass their world and scatter their ashes across space. The Concordat has survived for 11,000 years because we do not tolerate threats. We eliminate them. The vote was unanimous. War Fleet Omega would be deployed. Admiral Al, the most decorated military officer in Concordat history, would lead it personally. 600 years of experience, 900 successful campaigns. If anyone could handle whatever these humans truly were, it was Al. The Admiral received his orders with grim satisfaction. He had heard Axe's warning. He had also heard that Axe surrendered rather than dying honorably. Clearly, the commander's judgment was compromised. Still, Al was not a fool. He would approach this Sol system with caution. War Fleet Omega assembled at the home system of Prime. 400 ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets. Cruisers that could outrun light itself. Destroyers armed with weapons that could burn atmospheres. This was not a subjugation fleet. This was an annihilation fleet. The journey to Sol took 6 months. 6 months during which Admiral Al studied every piece of information about the humans. 6 months during which he became increasingly troubled by what he found. The humans had taken prisoners, treated them well according to the reports, fed them, given them medical care, even taught them about Earth culture. That was strange enough. But what truly disturbed Al was what the prisoners reported about human technology. The humans had completely reverse-engineered technology in less than a month. They understood it better than they themselves did. They had found weaknesses in systems that had been in use for 10,000 years. They had improved on designs that engineers had considered perfect. How was that possible? The Concordat's technology had been refined over. Every system had been tested and optimized. There should be no room for improvement. Unless Al thought with growing unease that had stopped innovating, stopped questioning, stopped improving. When you ruled everything, why change anything? The humans, from what he could gather, had never stopped fighting, never stopped improving. Every human nation had competed with every other human nation in an endless arms race. Every human war had taught them new ways to kill. Every human peace had given them time to invent better weapons for the next war. They had spent 10,000 years perfecting murder, while they had spent 10,000 years maintaining the status. When Warfleet Omega finally arrived at Sol, Al's unease crystallized into horror. The system had been transformed. The asteroid belt that should have been there was gone. In its place was a ring of fortresses, each one bristling with weapons. Mars, the red planet, was covered in installations. Luna, Earth's moon, looked like a weapons platform unto itself. And around Earth, 13 massive structures floated in perfect geometric formation. "Sensor scan," Al ordered. "Sir, I'm reading energy signatures beyond our classification scale," his sensor operator replied. "Those 13 structures, they're generating power equivalent to our entire fleet combined. Each one of them." Al felt his confidence crumbling. This was not a primitive species. This was not even a species that had gotten lucky against one fleet. This was a species that had built a defensive network capable of challenging the Concordat itself. "Open a communication channel," he said. Perhaps diplomacy was still possible. Perhaps N had been right. The channel opened. A human appeared on the screen. Male, young, wearing some kind of military uniform. Behind him, Al could see what looked like a command center filled with humans working at stations. "I am Admiral Al of the Concordat War Fleet Omega. I come to—" "We know who you are," the human interrupted. "I'm General Martinez, commanding officer of the Sol Defense Force. You have 10 minutes to turn your fleet around and leave this system. If you're still here in 11 minutes, we will consider it an act of war." Al bristled at the disrespect. "You dare threaten the Concordat? We have 400 ships. We could glass your world." Martinez's expression didn't change. "You could try, but you won't succeed. And if you attack us, we won't just defend ourselves. We'll come for your worlds, all of them. We'll dismantle your empire piece by piece. Is that really what you want?" Empty threats, Al said, but his voice wavered slightly. Are they? Martinez gestured to someone off-screen. One of the 13 structures suddenly flared with light. A beam shot out, crossing millions of kilometers in an instant. It struck an asteroid that Al's sensors had classified as insignificant. The asteroid simply ceased to exist, not exploded, not vaporized. It was there one moment and gone the next, converted into pure energy. That was 1% power, Martinez said calmly. We have 13 of these. We can fire them simultaneously. Your shields won't stop them, your armor won't slow them down, you'll just stop existing. He leaned forward. You have 9 minutes now, choose wisely. Al looked at his tactical display. 400 ships against one defended system. The numbers should have favored him, but those 13 structures changed everything. If the humans could truly do what Martinez claimed, then War Fleet Omega wasn't an annihilation fleet. It was target practice. But he couldn't retreat. The shame would be unbearable. The Concordat would never forgive such cowardice. All ships, he said slowly, prepare for combat. Target those 13 structures. Simultaneous firing solution. We strike hard and fast before they can respond. His officers scrambled to obey. Al watched the countdown timer. 8 minutes remaining before Martinez's deadline. 7, 6. At 5 minutes, Al gave the order, fire. 400 ships unleashed their full arsenals simultaneously. Antimatter lances, plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, enough firepower to shatter planets, all of it focused on those 13 structures. The weapons struck. The explosions were beautiful, violent, filling space with light and fury. When the light cleared, all 13 structures remained, undamaged, protected by shields that had simply absorbed everything that could throw at them. Martinez appeared on the screen again. His expression was sad now, disappointed. You had a choice, you made it, now live with the consequences, or rather don't. The 13 structures fired. Beams of pure coherent energy lanced across space. They didn't disperse. They didn't weaken with distance. They simply reached out and touched ships, and those ships stopped being solid matter. They became clouds of atoms, their constituent elements separated and scattered. 50 ships gone in the first salvo. Al watched in numb horror as his beautiful fleet, evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. Evasive maneuvers, scatter formation. The fleet broke apart, ships fleeing in all directions, but there was nowhere to run. The human weapons tracked them effortlessly. The fortresses opened fire now too, and Al realized those 13 structures had just been the beginning. The entire system was a weapon. Every installation, every platform, every piece of human engineering existed for one purpose: to kill anything that threatened Earth. The battle lasted 3 weeks, not because they were holding their own, but because the humans were learning. They captured ships intact, studying systems and tactics. They disabled vessels rather than destroying them, analyzing their weapons and defenses. Every day, human weapons became more efficient. Every day, losses mounted. Al found himself in command of fewer and fewer ships. His officers were surrendering, preferring captivity to certain death. He couldn't blame them. This wasn't war. This was a dissection. The humans were taking apart the Concordat military piece by piece, learning from every encounter. On the 20th day, Al sat alone in his flagship, watching his sensor display. 7 ships left, 7 out of 400. The humans had stopped attacking 2 hours ago. They were just waiting. A communication request came through. Al accepted it, too tired to care anymore. General Martinez appeared. He looked older now, exhausted. 3 weeks of constant combat had aged him. Admiral Al, your fleet is defeated. Your ships are disabled or destroyed. You can surrender now or you can die. There's no shame in choosing life. There is shame, Al said quietly. I failed. I brought 400 ships and couldn't conquer one primitive world. We're not primitive, Martinez said. We never were. You just assumed we were because we hadn't left our system yet. You never asked why we stayed here. You never considered that maybe we were waiting, preparing, building. Preparing for what? For you, Martinez gestured off-screen. We detected your scout probe 32 years ago. We knew someone was watching us. We knew they'd eventually come, so we unified, put aside our differences, pooled our resources. Every nation on Earth contributed to building the defenses you just encountered. He paused. We hoped you'd be peaceful. We hoped you'd come in friendship, but we prepared for the alternative. Al felt something crack inside him. The Concordat had been so arrogant, so certain of their superiority. They had never imagined that a primitive species might be smart enough to detect surveillance, might be unified enough to prepare, might be dangerous enough to win. What happens now? He asked. Now you surrender and you go home. You tell your High Council exactly what happened here. You tell them that if they ever threaten Earth again, we won't just defend ourselves, we'll come for them. Martinez's expression hardened. And Admiral, we've been studying your ships. We know where your worlds are. We know your defenses. We know your weaknesses. If we wanted to, we could build a fleet and strike at your heart within a year. Then why don't you? Because we don't want to conquer you, we just want to be left alone, Martinez sighed. Surrender, Admiral. Live to see tomorrow. Tell your leaders that humanity wants peace, but we'll accept war if they force it on us. Al surrendered. Like Axe before him, he was returned to Concordat space with a message. Unlike Axe, his message was believed, because he brought evidence, recordings of the battle, testimonies from thousands of prisoners, and 7 captured ships that the humans had completely reverse-engineered and improved. The High Council convened in emergency session. Read Al's report 3 times, each time hopping he had misunderstood. But the truth was inescapable. War Fleet Omega, the pride of the Concordat, had been crushed. Not by luck, not by surprise, but by a species that was simply better at warfare than they had ever been. We must retaliate, said, but his voice lacked conviction. We cannot allow this insult to stand. Retaliate with what? N asked. We sent our best fleet and it was destroyed. Do you want to send another? See how many more must die before you accept reality. The reality is that we are the Concordat, said. We have ruled for 11,000 years. We cannot show weakness. Listen to them argue, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about what Al had said in his private report, the parts he hadn't included in the official record. The humans had been kind to their prisoners. They had shared food, medical care, even entertainment. They had treated captured with more respect than the Concordat treated its own labor classes, and when they released the prisoners they had included gifts, books about human history and culture, technology for peaceful purposes, and a message. We don't want to be your enemies. We want to be your neighbors, but if you insist on war, we will oblige you, and we will win. We need to deploy the World Eaters, was saying. Ancient weapons, yes, but effective. They can consume entire planets. We glass Earth from orbit and end this threat permanently. And what happens when the humans detect the World Eaters coming? Encountered. They detected our scout probe 32 years ago. You think they won't detect massive planet-killing weapons? They'll intercept them, study them, and then they'll have planet-killing weapons of their own. So we do nothing, demanded. We accept this humiliation. Made his decision. We deploy the World Eaters, but not at Earth. We use them as a deterrent. We send a message to the humans. If they ever leave their system, if they ever threaten Concordat worlds, we will use these weapons. Mutually assured destruction. They leave us alone, we leave them alone. It was a reasonable plan, a logical plan. It might even have worked if the humans had been a reasonable species. But the humans weren't reasonable, they were thorough. The World Eaters never reached their deployment positions. Human ships intercepted them at the Concordat border. Not warships, not the massive vessels that had destroyed War Fleet Omega. Small craft, fast and agile, crewed by humans who called themselves volunteers. They didn't try to destroy the World Eaters. They disabled them, captured them, took them apart to see how they worked. And then humanity did something that changed the galaxy forever. They broadcast a message to every species in Concordat space, every enslaved world, every subjugated civilization, every species that had been conquered over the Concordat's 11,000-year reign. The message was simple: rise up, break your chains, fight for your freedom, we'll handle the warships. The Concordat collapsed in 18 months, not because humanity conquered it, because every enslaved species in Concordat space rose up simultaneously. Some fought with weapons, some fought with sabotage, some simply refused to work, grinding Concordat logistics to a halt. And whenever warships tried to enforce order, human ships appeared, millions of them, not large vessels, autonomous war machines, each one smart enough to think for itself, each one capable of replicating using available materials. The humans called them Terran storm units. They called them nightmares. They swept through Concordat space like locusts, targeting military installations, disabling warships, destroying infrastructure. But they didn't harm civilians. They didn't glass worlds. They just removed the Concordat's ability to fight back. Human volunteers joined the liberation forces on hundreds of worlds. They taught enslaved species how to use captured weapons, how to organize resistance, how to fight for their freedom. And they did it all with a terrifying efficiency that came from thousands of years of warfare against each other. The fell last, not because it was the strongest, because the humans saved it for the end. They wanted every to see their empire crumble before they lost there. When human ships finally darkened the skies over Prime, the High Council waited in their crystal chamber. They expected execution. They expected their world to be glassed, their people enslaved, their civilization destroyed. They expected humans to become what they had been. Instead, Secretary General walked into their chamber with a small delegation. She looked around at the 7 counselors, her expression unreadable. "The Concordat is dissolved," she said simply. "Your military is disarmed. Your enslaved species are free. Your empire is gone." And us asked, "What happens to us?" "You'll stand trial," said. "Every species you conquered deserves justice. You'll answer for your crimes, but you'll get a fair trial, lawyers, evidence, the right to defend yourselves." She paused. "We're not like you. We don't conquer, we don't enslave, we liberate." "Then what do you want?" asked bitterly. "We want to go home," said. "We want to return to Earth and forget this ever happened. We want to go back to arguing about trade disputes and fishing rights and whose turn it is to host the Olympic Games." She looked at each counselor in turn. "We don't want to be warriors. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be left alone." "But you won't be left alone," Anne said softly. "Now that the galaxy knows what you can do, others will come. They'll test you. They'll challenge you." Smiled grimly, "Let them try." The humans stayed for 6 months, helping stabilize the newly free worlds, ensuring peaceful transitions of power. Then they left. They dismantled their war machines, archived their weapons research, and went home to Earth. But they left behind a message, carved into the hull of every derelict warship, transmitted from every liberated world, embedded in every freed species' cultural memory. The Terran storm has passed. Nothing remains of those who threaten the innocent. We have returned to our world. We hope to never leave it again for war. But if you force us to become the storm once more, know this: we will remember everything we learned. We will come with weapons you cannot imagine. And when we are done, nothing will remain of you either. Choose peace. Choose to let others live in peace. Choose wisely. The galaxy chose wisely. For the next 300 years, no species threatened Earth. No fleet approached Sol system with hostile intent. No conqueror tried to build another empire. Because everyone remembered what happened when you angered the humans. Everyone remembered the Terran storm. And everyone remembered that the humans had chosen to stop, had chosen mercy over vengeance, had chosen to go home rather than rule. That choice, more than any weapon or victory, made humanity the most feared and respected species in the galaxy. Because the scariest thing about humans wasn't their weapons or their tactics or their innovations. It was their restraint. It was knowing that they could destroy you, but choosing not to. It was understanding that they would only become monsters if you forced them to. They learned that lesson too late, but they learned it well, and they made sure every other species in the galaxy learned it too. They built monuments to their defeat. They taught their children about the Terran storm. They remembered what happened when arrogance met determination. They remembered that humanity wanted peace, but they also remembered what happened when humanity was forced to choose war instead. In the crystal chamber on Prime, now a museum rather than a seat of power, a new inscription was carved into the walls. Himself had written it before his trial, as his final act as High Counselor. We thought ourselves strong because we had conquered. They showed us that true strength is choosing not to conquer. We thought ourselves wise because we had endured. They showed us that true wisdom is knowing when to fight and when to forgive. We thought ourselves superior because we had ruled. They showed us that the greatest power is the power to walk away. The Terran storm passed. We remain. We will not forget.